listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin. To master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Once you walked in a forest of splendor in which everything you did and everything you thought was aligned. It is possible at this time to begin to return to the old knowledge. Intuitive healer and manifestor Julia Griffin is here to talk about this unique time in history when all sentient beings, animals, plants, trees, and the earth are intent on creating this change. The wolves awakened her to the most incredible light, which opened gifts and brought knowledge that she longs to share. You are creators, and you are born to be creators of beauty, possibility, and joy. Join Julia on a journey into a beautiful and magical world where amazing possibilities exist. Let us help open the door. The Power of Inspiration and Awakening with Julia Griffin starts right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Julia Griffin, and you're listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening on Transformation Talk Radio. And I'm so happy to be here with you today. Stay with us for the next hour and let us help you experience a higher vibration and a new state of mind. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I awakened with real wolves. When I met a wolf, it talked to me in the same way that I'm speaking now. It was audible. And they taught me to read the energy of the heart. As a result, I can intuitively hear plants, animals, and people. And I became an intuitive healer and writer as a result. You can find me at One True Self, ONETrueSelf.com. We have a wonderful guest here today, Maureen St. Germain. In just a few minutes, we're going to talk about 5D and moving into higher vibrations, and not only how you can do it, but how you can stay there. Let me tell you about Maureen. She has over 25 years of experience in the area of mystical and sacred traditions known as the practical mystic. She's a prolific teacher and facilitator of spiritual knowledge for contemporary life. A lifelong interest in the Akashic records resulted in her being granted access to this dimension that had been off limits for most of humanity for millions of years. Founder of ARI, Akashic Records International, Maureen is an extremely accurate Akashic Records guide and instructor. She's also the founder of the St. Germain Mystery School, the Ascension Institute, and Founders Circle. An internationally recognized teacher and intuitive, she is also the creator of the app Illuminate, which is rich with guided meditations, tunings, chants, and activations. Living Your Best 5D Life is Maureen St. Germain's 8th book. She's obviously a prolific writer, and the 3rd in the 5D series following the international bestsellers, Waking Up in 5D and Mastering Your 5D Self. She lives near worldwide. Welcome, Maureen. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So I wanted to begin with to tell our listeners, what is 5D and how is it different from 3D? And a little bit about the different dimensions, because people get quite confused with those.
Okay, well, thank you for the fabulous introduction. And the difference between 3D and 5D, in simple terms, 5D is the equivalent of what all of our traditions have told us is heaven. So it's the ability to communicate lovingly and to know what you need to know the best course of action, those kinds of things. And so it's a vibrational data set. 3D is also a vibration where we have been able to choose between good and evil and right and wrong. And it is a place that we're leaving. We are moving to 5D, a place where we will have choice, but all the not God choices will fall away. They won't even occur to us. It's kind of like if you welcome someone into your home, maybe a neighbor stops by, you let them come in, you offer them a drink of some sort, and you sit down with them for a few minutes. If they say they're in a hurry, you'd still say, well, step in, at least feel comfortable. And the idea is you wouldn't make them stand there outside if they were your guest. And so the choice to bring them in is a 5D choice, so to speak. And the possibility of not letting them in or not speaking to them at this point doesn't occur to you. So all of those choices that would be harmful or hurtful go away. Right. And everybody's moving into 5D periodically. And some people say they're longer, And it's like a sine wave. So you can be in 5D one moment and then slide back into 3D. And it is a bit of a roller coaster for a lot of us, because staying in 5D is a little bit of an art. You really don't notice you're in 5D because everything is going well. So you're not analyzing what's going on. But as soon as everything falls back into 3D, you go, what's going on? And then you realize what has happened.
And really 3D becomes more and more unbearable. But you just made a great point, because I had noticed that when I was teaching classes, that people don't really know that they're in 5D. They know they feel much better, but they're not really aware that they've moved into that point.
They haven't made that equation yet. It's a
Right.
little bit like if you grew up in a household that spoke both French and English, initially you might mix those two languages and speak them, as a child, you might speak both of them concurrently. As an adult, a person might recognize common French words that we have integrated into our English language. Like it's a fait accompli. Pretty much everyone knows what that means. It's a done deal. Bon voyage, have a good journey. These things we know and understand, but we might not notice that we're speaking French.
Right. And after a while, it is sort of like that for intuitives. It becomes mixed. You're just aware of, that person's aura is this color, or they're radiating this or that. And it's no longer, why am I seeing this in color? Or why am I having this reaction?
Exactly. And that's another thing, that we are accustomed to defining our world in linear vantage point, cause and effect. And when we move into 5D, we lose that need to do that. So if you're very mental and you've slid into 5D, you're going to want to frame things into cause and effect. What caused that? That was weird. But in 5D, as you shift and adjust, you're going to go, what's going on? That's a very lovely, open-ended way of getting more information without being judgmental.
Mm-hmm. Because you're simply reading the energy. It's more of a detached thing. And sometimes, too, I think at a higher level, as you're aware of it, the energy changes, particularly if you can move into your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the big difference is the vibrational data set and the fact that we're not attracted to do selfish choices. You might run into somebody that maybe you had a bad experience with earlier. You run into them in a grocery store or something, and you think, I'm going to avoid that person. But then they come up to you all smiley and friendly, and you find yourself being generous and smiling back. And then in hindsight, you're thinking about this and you're thinking, wow, what came over me? Why was I so nice? And the answer is because I was 5D.
Yeah. I actually had 3 or 4 of those experiences over the weekend. And I thought, well, my prejudices were interesting because they no longer apply.
Uh-huh. Very nice. Very nice.
Okay,
Yeah.
so above 5D, what do we have there?
We have another data set of dimensions that we understand and define. And we go up to 12. And then 13 is not really understood or available to us, although my guides have said there are construction workers in it. And then there's a total of 56 that create subsets along that whole journey.
Right. Do you want to tell them why 56?
No, I've never asked. I don't know.
Well, that's something everyone can ponder, because one of the wonderful points that you make in your book is how important it is to ask questions and to ask the right questions. I found that fascinating because I've found that too.
Yes. And the thing that's really hard to do, and this is the thing that all of us need to do to get where we're going with grace and ease, and that is to begin to comprehend, to understand that the way we define ourselves, the way we define our world, and the experiences within it are no longer applicable in 5D. So all bets are off. All of our history, this is how we've done things, or this is how things are. If this happens, this means this. It's completely different. And what do I want to say? It's a little bit like comparing soccer in Europe and American football. They're both called football. And we know the rules are different. Soccer has this quality of less of a physical contact game and more of a competition, a team competition. And what's interesting to me is it's like a nice transition from American football. But the thing that I find most 5D of all the games I've encountered that people play is a game called Ultimate. And it's played usually with people, young people in the age bracket of 18 to say 30. And it requires that on the field, you have at least one or two women, and then the rest of the players are men. And they run between the goalposts. And what are they moving? A frisbee. And the coolest thing about this game is that if your opponent calls a foul, you have to take it.
No.
So there's no competition on calling a foul falsely, because if you start doing that, then the opposing team will do it to you. So you don't bother. And finally, at the close of the game, the losing team is required to make up a ditty, a song about the winning team. And they can use familiar songs and they can use familiar words. There's no regulation there. But suddenly, the losing team stands out and shines. Isn't that cool?
It's wonderful. It's a higher vibration.
Mm-hmm. So
way of competing or working together, the combination of it all.
In the Midwest, they actually have ultimate leagues. Just like there's bowling leagues, there's ultimate leagues. Cool, huh?
Yeah. So your book is so good. You can see already, I'll show you how much I've read it. It's already dog-eared and folded. But you talk a lot about how people can keep themselves in that 5D vibration. And you have so many wonderful exercises. Will you want to tell them about that? I know you talk about the heart, you talk about golden sheets, you talk about letting go of fear and hate and self-doubt.
Yes. So I'll start with the golden sheets. They came in as beings of light, and they literally came in like a sheet of paper, but more like a bed sheet, okay?
Right.
Big, really big. And they've also presented in a spiral. So, if you could imagine a golden sheet that would have this quality, it could keep going up and up. So these energies are directly from source, and they make you less visible to those who would have you fail. So if you have, a family member that's always trying to, start a fight, or they're really insecure, but they're trying to make you insecure so they don't feel so insecure. So they say stuff to you that, pushes your buttons. And you find with the golden sheets that they are not inclined to do that because you're not rattling their energy, which is very interesting because you're kind of integrating with them in a different way because of the golden sheets. Another way to get in 5D and stay there is to announce when you go to bed, I am waking up in 5D, which was actually the name of the first book of that series. Then another way to be 5D is to announce in the morning, I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with and everyone I'm in contract with. Because when we announce that, when we ask for a day of heaven on earth, it is the same as asking for 5D.
Right.
And I had such an amazing experience where I had said this as a follow-up to something I said that I wished I hadn't. And it was kind of like a mistake, a Freudian mistake. And I immediately corrected it with, but I'm having a day of heaven on earth because. And over time, I realized that I didn't have to wait till I was in a very busy day. I could ask for it at any time. And so can you. So can everybody. I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth. And then one of my students surprised me with how she expanded it. And she said that she was planning on a family reunion. They were all going to meet in a big house in North Carolina on the ocean, and everybody's going to come. And she said, but one of my sisters is a drama queen, and she always spoils the party. So I started asking for a week of heaven on earth for our family reunion. And the day before the event, my drama queen sister called and said, I'm not coming. Already she's trying to create drama.
Right.
But then she says, I'm checking myself into a detox facility. So nobody worried about her. They all knew where she was. Everything was cool. And she said, we had the best time.
The universe took care of it.
Make an invocation that says, look, I've got a family reunion. I've got a class reunion. I've got, whatever. I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth. I'm asking for a week or 2 weeks of heaven on earth while I'm in Europe, like that. And what that does is it sets the stage and elevates that experience right away, because your words are very powerful. Another way to say in 5D is to say your intentions out loud. I initially created a bedtime prayer that I used to say silently. I was raised Catholic, we said our prayers silently. And occasionally in Mass, we would repeat after the priest or something like that. So I noticed that I wanted to get my spouse involved. So I started reading it to him and letting him say it after me. And then I made him take turns with me. And I discovered that when we were saying it out loud, I was getting a more intense effect. So reading, hearing it, and saying it all amplify whatever it is we're trying to manifest or what we're choosing to experience. And then there's tons of meditations. I've written so many meditations that an app developer came to me and said, we need to make your app. And it was one of my students, but he was a developer. And so that's what we did. We created the Illuminate app. And that has, over 30 meditations. It is free. What we do is we give you like 6 or 7 free meditations, and then you can subscribe if you want.
Right.
So
that sounds wonderful. The golden sheets I'm definitely going to use, because instead of doing all my errands in 2 or 3 hours, which I used to do, I now make 2 or 3 trips depending on what the world feels like. So I will definitely try that one soon.
Yeah, I think you're going to like it a lot.
I know I will.
Back on them. Yeah. And it's interesting because when they first came in, I was real clear, real sure of this experience and who they were. And then I kind of got self-conscious because I realized nobody's ever talked about the golden sheets, and so I kind of let it slide in the background. And then one of my repeat students said, hey, where's all the information on the golden sheets? And we went back and got more information. And also I began to understand how powerful they were. They wouldn't let it slide,
Well, I know that using a golden dome is very protective for places and for your home during storms, and it can help a lot. That's something anyone can use. And so, and it works very well. So I knew as soon as I read golden that was like a higher frequency and a different way of doing it, which is great. It's always wonderful to learn new things.
That's very cool. And there is a wonderful meditation, a couple of meditations named golden that, the guides have told me to name them this way. And one is called the golden spiral, and the chakra meditation, where we spiral around the chakras and create a feminine connection to our divine self. Masculine would be a straight line. A feminine would be a curved line. So you start at the heart and then you spiral down to the solar plexus and then up to the throat. What happens when you go down into the solar plexus from the heart? You infuse all that fear and worry with courage. And then when you go up to the throat, self-confidence to speak your truth. It's amazing.
It sounds like it. I should probably remind our listeners, I think I've said it before. In alchemy, they say that if you can pull up the four sides of the pyramid, which would be your physical body, your emotions, your mentality, and your spirituality, into the pyramid, then you've transmuted the lower parts of the self into gold. I think that that's why gold is probably so effective.
I like it. I've not heard it spoken that way. That's brilliant.
And so as soon as you saw that, I thought, this is inspired by alchemy on a soul level. So thank you so much for that.
And then there's another meditation called the Golden Bowl, and it's based on a tiny segment in the New Testament where a man describes his experience and says, connect with source before the golden bowl is broken and the cord is severed. And I had been given a lot of information about this golden bowl that exists around the head. And it's directly connected to your sinus cavities. And what I didn't know until I started doing science research is that there are sinus cavities in the back of the head that science doesn't know what they do. And so when I wrote the meditation, what I was shown is that it's like the satellite dish to call home. And when you activate the golden bowl, you're literally lighting up here and making it easy to get your inner information.
Oh, that's fascinating. I'll have to try that. That's very exciting. So
for one of the meditations, it was featured and won a number of awards as a guided meditation. But I wanted it was so important for me to get it to people because it helps us with their connection to source. I just put it in the free one.
Right. So we're definitely going through a period of reconnection. And I think for some people, the moving up and down is difficult right now. You know, they say the world feels as though it's in turmoil and everything is in polarity. And then you meditate and it's not. And then you go back out and it is. That's just a transitory phase, though, don't you think?
I do. And I also think we need, we have a necessary choice to look at that and then turn it off. You know, get the awareness so you're not living in a bubble, but at the same time, you're not being affected by it, because that is the temptation to get pulled into the polarity.
Right. And to make things right and wrong, black and white, because really we're trained to do that as children, probably for safety reasons or stupidity reasons. Who knows? But that's something that really has to go away. You know, it's like there are infinite layers of matter to be examined. It's not just two ways.
Yes. You know, when my kids was little, I was in the other room listening, and the teacher was testing my son. And she said, if the floor is down, the ceiling is, and he said up. And then the next question was, if lemons are sour, sugar is, and he said bad for you.
That's great.
So, you know, even though you think your kids aren't getting it, they are. And I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the new children.
All right, we're getting ready to go to break, but when we come back, we can talk about the new children. I'm talking with Maureen St. Germain today, and we're having a fascinating conversation about not just moving into a higher vibration, but how you stay there and how you come back if you've had a tough day or you feel like the world is coming in on you. And we're going to go to break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back. We're going to talk about the new children when we come back and share more techniques. Hello, everyone. We're back. I'm Julia Griffin with the Power of Inspiration and Awakening on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm very happy to have Maureen St. Germain with us today. She's telling us about 5D and higher vibrations, how to alter how you think and feel and get into that vibration. And now we're going to talk about the new children. Maureen, what can you tell us about them?
One of the ways you will know if you have given birth to an ascended master, and that's where we're going with this storyline, is that they're fearless. And they're constantly testing the limits of physical form. So one day I was walking off of a ship from a cruise that we were in a port, and this child went running down the plank, and the mother's calling after him. And then she turns to her friend and said, "He's fearless." And I thought, okay, so we have another little ascended master here. And it's scary for the parent. So as a parent or a friend of a parent who has a child that's like this, your job is to check in on every single event. You cannot use the old paradigm of how you raise children. You cannot use the way of discipline that our parents used. You cannot do any of that. Instead, you are in a situation where you must explain to them. So, for example, a child does something that he makes it out okay, but you know it's dangerous for children to do, and you don't want his pals to be doing it. So you put your hands on their shoulder and you say, "Look, I know you can do this safely. However, most children don't have that skill set. Most children don't have your abilities. And this does not make you better than them. It's just different. And what you need to understand is you cannot do this in this environment where others can be watching you and seeing what you're doing. It's because it could be harmful to them." Now, they care deeply about other people and other children. So once you frame whatever it is they're doing and how it harms others, even if it's just by example, they'll be able to be self-contained. If you say you're not allowed to do this, forget it. If you say to your master child, ascended master child, say you're sorry, and they dig their heels in, they get really, puffed up, and I'm not doing that. Don't try. Don't even bother. Instead, teach them to ask the question, "Are you okay?" Now, let's say a child trips another child, maybe it's on purpose, maybe it's not, doesn't matter, and the second child falls. If the first child says, "Are you okay?" what it does is validates the fact that I know something happened on my watch. Then the second child is given the opportunity to explain, "Well, no, I've hurt my knee. It hurts like crazy. That's why I'm crying so hard." Okay. And then the perpetrator child, can own it by saying, "Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have done that," or something like that. But what happens is it changes the variety of experience. So when you make a child say, "I'm sorry," that means that the child that's being required to say, "I'm sorry," is lower than the child who was injured. And that creates inequality, that creates polarity, can create jealousy. So the idea is to give the children a new way of looking at things. And that's kind of what I mean when I say the game has completely changed. It's not nearly as important to say "I'm sorry" as it used to be. Now, we still do it as a convention in society when we're late or something like that, and we want to acknowledge, "I'm late. I hope I didn't hold anyone up," or something. You could say it that way. You don't need to say "I'm sorry." We tend to do that. But it's huge when you stop requiring people to say "I'm sorry," and that includes children. So that's one way you're ascended master child.
I think a lot of those children are remarkable. They're very brilliant. They watch the news. They know everything that's going on, and they have great, immense hope for the future.
Mhm. Yeah, they're not taken aback by anything. I know a little boy when he went into that I worked with, that when he went into the military and went through basic training, and basic training can be really, really rough. And he called his mother and said, "It's just a game, Mom. I don't know why these guys are melting down, it's just a game, And so their perspective on life is slightly different than ours, you know. It's
It's
quite
different.
exciting. And different's a good word, because again, they do not grok, they do not understand the way you and I might think as a parent, or historically what we were taught to think. They are seeing life in a whole different vantage point. And it's quite amusing, actually, when you
It's
hear them
very
talk.
beautiful. They love a lot, and they seem to me to be very sensitive to energy
Mhm. Absolutely.
and at home with it, unlike I was. Mine
Mhm.
was always like I was feeling something that no one else could feel, but to some degree, they seemed aligned in a pretty good vibration as far as energy is concerned.
Yes, and a lot depends upon the parents. So,
That's true.
if you do have children, especially if they're under age 6, if something happens that you don't like or you don't think they should be doing or shouldn't have done, instead of reprimanding or punishing, find ways to communicate that with a awareness kind of thing. Um, One day I came home to the trampoline in the backyard being dangerously close to the garage, which had a low roof. And at dinner, I didn't ask, "Were you guys jumping off the roof?" That to me was pretty obvious. I
Hmm.
wasn't able to see, so I don't know for
Right.
sure. But I said, basically, the neighbor kids don't have the same practice that you do on the trampoline. You do not want to be doing that in front of them. So please move the trampoline back to the center. They knew I knew.
Yeah, they
It was,
need you. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I say that to people. You can say, "No, I don't have any proof that this happened, and I don't even know that it did. But if it did, let's don't do this again." And they get that really well.
That's still labeling it. That's still labeling. I'm suggesting that you acknowledge that it occurred by what you say next, instead of
Hmm.
saying, if
Okay,
this
so
happened.
rephrase for me.
Um, I noticed the trampoline was close to the garage.
Hmm.
It might be dangerous if somebody were to jump off of it. That way, I'm not saying if someone did, I'm not doing any of that.
Right.
I'm just saying if someone were to do it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
You're making it completely neutral.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, and
neutral
that's
is
not easy as a parent because you're really worried about your kids.
right.
They are fearless, and they will do things that you and I think are absolutely dangerous. But because they're ascended masters, they're often protected in ways that you and I might not be, you
Right.
know.
And I
So
would make a point too that when you can stay neutral, you're engaging your heart, and it's easier for people to hear you.
mhm. Yes, when my kids were little, there were times when I wanted to really yell at them. And then I learned to put my hands on their shoulder and talk to them face to face. Well, that builds a connection to the heart, my heart to them and their heart to me.
Right.
And then you don't need to yell.
And
So,
we can hope soon that that becomes a new language.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I
Yeah.
think so.
So tell us about the Akashic Records. You tell me about your involvement with it. I know you read them. Tell us about that. And then I think you teach classes.
The the masters came to me and told me I was being given access to a portal that had been closed to humanity for eons. And I thought that was cool, but I didn't exactly understand what they were telling me. And then I asked later, a couple of months later, am I the only one? And they said, no, but you will lead others to have the same skill. And it was shortly thereafter that I was told by my guides to start a school and to start training people. So we do have an amazing school. It's called the Founders Circle of the Akashic Records. And what we're doing in that program is teaching the Akashic Records in a really nice, deep way. We're spending a lot of time with people. And we're also doing marketing and teaching them marketing skills. And we're also teaching them business planning and how to run their business so that they can be a spiritual being with a business that can support them.
That's wonderful. So what was the first thing that you read from your Akashic? Do you want to get some water? You need water? Okay. I was going to say, what was your first experience of reading the Akashic Records?
Well, I teach a formal way of doing it, but I think I've been plugged into the records all my life because I've said things that were 100% accurate. And either that or my guides were telling me things. So my very first experience being in the records, I was physically in the records. Don't do that. I got in trouble for it. Because we, as humans, are meant to go to this data set, this vibrational data set that's in the 11th dimension. We're supposed to go there as a outsider looking in. And the guides that we work with, whomever, and they might change on a daily basis depending upon your client and your mastery and things like that. But essentially, they're like research librarians. They're not going to let you in. They're going to bring you the data you're looking for. And the reason is very profound. The Akashic Records are a living field. And a lot of people think of them as like a book or a library. They are a living field. So if you can imagine, I'm going to give you a scenario, being married, having difficulty, going inside the records and discovering that the person you're married to killed you in a previous lifetime.
Which is pretty common. That's not as uncommon as people would think. Or you watch the person die and told them you would find them again, and then you end up married again. Yeah. That happens a lot.
Yeah, it does. You're absolutely right. And so you wouldn't want to be in that thick because then you're creating a loop, like a loop on a spreadsheet that's not going to compute. So that's why we're not to go in the records. Yeah.
Right.
But the record keepers are pretty profound and will give you information that you didn't know or weren't expecting. And the cool thing about, and I don't know if this is true in other traditions, our tradition is very specific. I was given very specific guidelines on what we were to do as a process. And so we get in very, very high. And what happens in our readings is we start out with opening remarks. And most traditions just say, give us your questions. And what we have found is by tapping in and giving opening remarks, we're in the field of that client. And it's so obvious because the client says, how could you know that? And the minute the client says something like that, then of course the student, the guide who's reading, has a little bit of a confirmation. Yeah, I'm in the right place. And then another thing that is very important is we have a lot of tools. So I encourage people to use certain kinds of crystals. We have essential oil blends that were made specifically for this training. And we also make sure that the client understands some basic protocols. So you're asked to not ask about other people without providing their name. You can ask about somebody and it might be possible to get information, but it's much more appropriate if you have their full name. And then you're not allowed to ask about their records. You're only asking about the relationship of me to you.
Right. Where their records intersect with your records.
Exactly. Well said. So Yeah, it was an
I
interesting.
think I love the thing about your introduction or your opening words, because that would really help a person to open their heart to the information, your opening
Exactly.
remarks.
Exactly. It helps them, as you say, open your heart and hear it. And one final thing that happens when we open the records is, so we do the opening remarks, you ask a question and we answer it, but the record keepers do two things. They answer a question and then they give advice. So, if you're told, the reason this happened is because of a past life thing and you're still working through it, and you'll be able to complete that in a couple of years, or you'll be able to be done with it in 2 months. That is so nice to get that kind of advice. And just remember to keep acting as if there's no problem. So they answer the question, but then they also give some words of advice to tell you what to do with this information.
Right.
Not just here it is, but I had a guy who asked about his daughter, and she had been acting out and not treating him well. And he felt like he had been a good father, and she was an adult, and he wanted her to reciprocate like an adult.
Mhm.
And the record keeper said, "You and she were arch enemies in a previous life. You had advanced, and she did not. And in this lifetime, you agreed to sponsor her. That's not karmic. It's definitely not karmic, because he wanted to know what he had done to cause this. And the
Right.
answer is you volunteered." you know?
Yeah.
And then after they gave him that information, then they explained, your job is to continue to love her anyway, act as if there's no problem. So if you would normally send a gift for birthday, then do that. And it may take 2 or 3 years.
Which isn't that long in terms of soul evolution and karmic relationships. I know that sounds like it's a really long time to everyone, but it's not, because it involves so many minuscule changes along the way.
Yes. And not only that, all those minuscule changes might make it happen sooner,
Yeah, agreed.
especially if you roll with it. And
Right.
what I think happens is, if you know there's a finite limit to this craziness, it's easier to step up
Right.
than if you just know that it's a problem and God knows when it's going to get fixed,
Right. And I think something changes when you get that type of information, because your soul and the person that you are now are coming together with the information. Just that is a change.
Mhm. Yeah. It's a very powerful time when people go in the records.
Yeah.
And you can learn to open your own records pretty easily. And opening the records for others actually makes even more flow, because now you have two people that are channeling upwards into that zone.
Well, and that goes with what you said earlier about how when you say something, it's more powerful than just thinking it. And if you teach and you say something and you can feel people understand it, it immediately becomes so much stronger than it was when just you knew it.
Exactly. A lot of times being in the records is simply a validation of what you already knew. And you don't need the records to tell you this, but the human psyche wants to have a partner in it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I wrote a lot of stuff in this book on the Akashic records. So
I
there
will
is a
read
book.
it.
Yeah.
You can see
So
how much I've read this in the last couple weeks. So there are just so many interesting concepts with this. And I think that we're bringing up a point that people who want to stay in 5D should know. And that is that this exploring, this finding out about the energies that you brought in this time, along with your relationships, and learning to change how you feel about your relationships, is a big part of the new earth, or moving into what we're becoming. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to do this for fun. It's like we're collecting pieces of knowledge over a sphere. And when we bring in all the pieces of knowledge, there's a big shift.
exactly. And the pieces all fit together. And as we learn to work together, we are able to piece it together in a way that we would, in a tapestry that we would not have created otherwise without one
Yeah.
another.
I had a trisomy baby. I guess she died when she was about a year and a half old, but she was a beautiful soul with so much energy for her parents. And when I asked her about the future, she said, I'm making a patchwork quilt with angels and it's for the earth. And since that time, it's just like what we're talking about. It's like putting together all these patches that make a whole that's beautiful.
That's fantastic. What a great phraseology. So another way you would know you were in the records is they use language that I call lofty language. So what does that mean? It means they use words that you know, but that you wouldn't typically use in everyday language. And so the conversation is elevated in that way. And so, we learn to accept that as part of the communication. It's very cool.
And you also said something in your book that everyone should know. If you're getting communications or energy or direction, you need to ask, is this in the highest light?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really important because there are many people who are like-minded here, listening, for example. You may even know somebody that's like this, and they're eager to be the channel. They're eager to step up and to bring information forward. But then, for whatever reason, they're bringing in something else. And initially, it seems okay, but there's usually some kind of a tip-off. So what happens is you can channel an energy that is not at 100% light. That can happen with so fast. And then you keep channeling it and not realizing it. And how would you know if it's not of the light? Well, the obvious thing is what you just said, Julia, that you would simply check in and ask, is this energy or is this information or is this being of 100% God light? But a lot of people don't think that because they think if they're getting something that must be of the light, and that's not true.
No.
And the second way you would know is if you start getting information that's strange or wacky. You get told 5 things that are appropriate, and then you get told 1 or 2 things that are completely inappropriate. And your own angels and guides and the Akashic Record guides will never tell you to do something that's inappropriate. It's pretty straightforward.
It's not consistent. That's another tip. The other one is that you'll get information if you're like, let's say, for example, you're a person who gets flashes of the future. You will get unhappy futures. You won't get solutions.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because that creates more louche. That creates more energy, a gourmet lunch for those that would have us fail.
Yeah. So for all of you who are awakening, if you're hearing anything for the first few years of this, maybe even I still do it, I'm not sure, but ask. How long does it take to ask? No time. And if there's not an answer or you feel the presence move off, you know it was not of the highest light.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I do it all the time too, because if we don't take the time to ask, we're an ego. We're assuming because we could do this yesterday that it's the same today. And my opinion is each day is unique. Each day is different. Each day is another experience. And it may be that yesterday I was totally clear and today I wasn't.
Right. And we can say it a different way. I mean, on different days, there are different animals in the woods, and there's a different feeling of nature and nature spirits. So what I got on Sunday is not going to be the same animals and the same energy that I met today.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I mean, no one would expect to see the same animal at the same time every single day unless it was a pet.
Well, and even our pets are not the same every day.
That's what I mean. We're all changing. And I think there's such an acceleration right now that even if you've used exercises for years, you may find yourself rewriting them or doing them in a completely different way. And if you suddenly get something like, oh, this is a great different way of doing this, or here's a hint, I'm like, are you of the light? Are you of the highest light? And it either goes or comes at that point.
Yeah. If it's not of 100% God light, it will not be able to say yes. It will not be permitted to say yes.
Well, we're coming to the end of our interview. Why don't you tell everyone what you're teaching right now? I know you teach a lot and where they can find you.
Okay. So I am offering an Akashic Records class in online, and we will be scheduling a remote viewing class later this fall. And then we are also running our Founder Circle program, where we give you all kinds of training, and it's done in a very clever 5D way as far as your payment goes. So that's very interesting. And I'm teaching general Q&A through a program called the Ascension Portal. And we meet every month, and I answer whatever questions that people have. And I also usually have a little lesson that I share with people so that they can continue to grow and expand. And it's very, very inexpensive. It's like $10.
And you can all see Maureen's website underneath her picture. And so you can go there and you can find her. If you'd like, you can sign up for my biweekly newsletter at onetrueself.com, and you'll get tips about what's going on, upcoming classes, and more information. So, Maureen, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you to my listeners who are here with me. I'll see you in a couple weeks, and thanks so much for listening. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin to master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Join us next time as Julia takes us deeper into the memory of the moments of light where transcendence and enlightenment emerge. The memory of the jewel of consciousness is always lived within you to tap into waves of energy and create huge changes by imagining the beauty of the vision and desires that are hidden in the heart. Learn to find your way back to nature, beauty, and your own heart, which holds the secrets of your existence and future. To discover more about Julia's adventures, animal communication, and the teachings she brings to every show, visit onetrueself.com. That's onetrueself.com. That's ONE, trueself.com.